Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Opera 101 with Cleveland Opera Theater. My name is Dean Buck. I am the assistant conductor and chorus master for Cleveland Opera Theater. Monday through Friday, we get together to do little sessions explaining what we do in this world. And today, I am extremely honored and happy to be joined by Sean Kelly. Maestro Sean Kelly is head of music at Opera Omaha. He has also worked for the Metropolitan Opera, Atlanta Opera, Wolf Trap. He has worked in both Italy and Turkey and was music director of the Brooklyn-based Loft Opera. He has had a pretty wonderful, illustrious career and is also a wonderful cook, a wonderful mixer of drinks, and has been a good friend. Maestro, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dean.
Quick, to start us off, could you just tell people tuning in what exactly head of music means? What are your roles in the company? What sort of stuff do you do with that title?
Sure. The strange thing about this title, like a lot of titles in opera houses and opera companies, is that it means something a little bit different in every company. What the head of music at the Metropolitan Opera does and what the head of music at Opera Omaha does isn't the same thing at all. What I do at Opera Omaha is quite a bit. There's several hats that I wear, kind of going from long-term vision to now. I'm part of the team that is, does season planning and kind of strategic, where things fit in, what the audience would respond to best, in which order, and obviously casting for those shows. I stay in very close contact with the conductor leading up to the beginning of rehearsals. We discuss cuts. I communicate those cuts to the librarian at the Omaha Symphony. I'm also chorus master, so I prepare the music for the chorus. I make a type of study guide for them that we put on a private YouTube channel to help them get the music uploaded as best as possible before the first rehearsal. And then once we begin production, again, keeping in close contact with the singers and the maestro to make sure everyone's happy. If somebody is, slightly underprepared, I will have coachings with them and get them back on the right track. Chorus music preparation, and then I'm generally around for all of the rehearsals, or at least available for all of the rehearsals, and just try to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible.
Awesome. So it's a lot of hats to wear.
At Opera Omaha is a kind of one of the unique things is that we have an incentive called the Holland Community Opera Fellows, and it's a group of 4 teaching artists that it's not a young artist program, so they're not here doing role study or covering, or they really don't have much to do with the Orpheum, the main stage productions, but they go out into the community and create need-based work with different groups. And it really is really beautiful, impactful work that they do, but they're singers. And so with them, I also coordinate several performances, like maybe 1 or 2 things a month. We do, public performances of that. We have weekly coachings and all of that.
That's amazing. That seems like,
It's really great. It's a new program. This is its 3rd year, and I'm in my 3rd year. So I was here at the beginning of it, and to see the work they do is just so beautiful. It's really great, and I can't wait to see how that develops in the coming years.
That's awesome. And I feel like it sounds like it gives the singers a lot more that they would be interested in than a lot of young artist programs where, they never go on stage, or they're singing these compromario roles that are not what they're training to sing. And, it's cool that's awesome that they get to do some real engaging work with you.
Yeah, it's been great.
Awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got to where you are now, what made you fall in love with opera, what brought you into this strange yet wonderful world?
Yeah, my journey, I feel, as I talk to my friends and my colleagues, I feel like my journey is as convoluted a path as as anyone's. I started out. I taught myself how to play the piano when I was about 7th grade. So I'm not sure how old that is, 12, 13, I guess. And I taught myself for a few years. And at a certain point, somebody said, listen, you're, actually talented. You should find a piano teacher. And so I really didn't start taking formal lessons until I was in high school. And I went to a private Catholic high school, and I was the only person that could or was interested in playing the piano for any of those musical things that happened in school. So I immediately started playing for all the masses, and I was the rehearsal pianist for the choirs. And, I would play some auditions for the musicals and help out with the musicals, and I would be in the pit for the musicals. And before I realized what a coach was, before anyone ever said like, oh, this is a career, a vocal coach, a repetitor, I was coaching. My family on my mom's side is Italian. So, I understood how that language went. And, that's the majority of what young singers are singing. And so I would like be giving advice and like, oh, that was nice, but try it this way. And, it's a part of my personality too, that I kind of want to collaborate. And so before I realized what a career choice would have been, I was coaching. And my piano teacher was always like hitting his head up against the wall because I liked playing the piano and I think I was okay, but I did not like to practice very much. I was much more interested in like just being a teenager and getting into trouble. And so he said, listen, Sean, if you want to study music in college, you have to enjoy practicing 4 and 6 and 8 hours a day. And I was like, no, absolutely not. But I also played the horn. I was a pretty good horn player in high school. And so I actually did my university auditions as a horn player. And I got into the schools I applied for, and I ended up choosing Carnegie Mellon University, which was, I lived just outside of Pittsburgh. So it was like the hometown university for me. And after very shortly, I realized that I did not want to be a horn player. There's a whole psychological game that you have to play with yourself to be a good horn player. It just wasn't me. I was never happy. I was never satisfied with how things went. And so I talked to my teacher and I said, listen, is there any way I could apply for the piano program? And he said, well, yeah, sign up for the latest audition possible. Don't do anything but practice your audition pieces from now until then, and we'll see what happens. And so that was the beginning of this. So I finished my degree in piano performance. I lived in Italy for a year. I was an au pair and kind of absorbing the culture and music and all that good stuff, a lot of wine. And then I did my grad studies in Boston at the New England Conservatory. Right after that, I was hired at Carnegie Mellon as faculty member. I taught French, Italian, and German diction. I was a coach in the voice program, and then I was also the music director for the opera workshop. So it was just like a small opera or small scenes or things like that in the classroom. And then we would culminate with a performance at the end of the semester. So I did that for about 4 years, and I realized that I was becoming the faculty member that I always resented, which was the person who was teaching opera, but who never actually worked in an opera house or ever did it. They're just regurgitating what they read in a textbook, which I never enjoyed. I always preferred having teachers who are teaching what they've done and not what they read, because I can also read. I can read the same book. So before that went too far, I quit my job teaching and I moved to Italy. And I moved to Rome, not really knowing anybody there. I have family that they're in the southern part of Italy. So I moved to Rome and I started working as in an agency. I was helping, a talent agency. And I was kind of ready to just not be a musician. And then sure enough, destiny had in store for me to stay a musician, and one thing after another, and I ended up falling back into music and working with opera, and I started working in opera companies and around Italy, and that was really great. So I was there for about 5 years. When I was ready to move back was when the market crashed here. And so it wasn't the best time for me to come back. So the last gig I had in Italy was a tour of an opera in Turkey. And while I was there, the head of music for the Turkish opera kind of snuck in the rehearsal and saw it. And on one of the breaks, she came up to me, and after a pretty comic back and forth, because I couldn't speak Turkish and she couldn't speak English, but I could speak French and Italian, but she couldn't, but she could speak German, and my German's not that good. So it was a pretty staccato conversation. But she said, oh, you run rehearsals really well. You're speaking different languages in the room. Would you ever, I would hire you in a second. Would you ever want to live and work in Turkey? And I kind of just laughed and said, absolutely not. Like, I've never been, I had just gotten to the country. I certainly couldn't speak the language. I didn't know what the culture was. I didn't know anything. And I said, no, thanks, but yeah, I'm good. But she was insistent, and she was pretty transparent about everything. And she had the artistic administrator send me like a dummy contract. And she said, listen, you can stay in one opera house the whole year. You could travel, you could do a different production in a different house. And it was, it was an interesting experience. I'm glad I did it. I was there for 2 years. And then I moved back to the States. I moved to New York, and I met you shortly after that. And yeah, I've been in Omaha now. It'll be 3 years in June, so almost 3 years. So yeah, it's as convoluted as it gets.
Awesome, though. I feel like having such a varied career gives you, or has probably given you, a lot of different perspectives on the industry, like working in Italy and, for all intents and purposes, the heartland of opera, working in Turkey, which is kind of a totally different place. Also working at, the Metropolitan, which is kind of the biggest house in the States, and also working with Loft Opera, which is like was a kind of a scrappy startup turned opera company. How has this breadth of your career and your experience informed how you look at opera now in kind of a management, a position of authority? How has this shaped the way you kind of view the art form, and like what have you gotten from such a varied career that you're taking forward to your position now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the tools that helps everybody, and I think I'm good at it, is kind of falling into a situation and assessing in a quick way where you are and what it is, and if there are problems that need to be addressed, to be able to react in a quick way, but also an intelligent way. And working in Italy, you kind of see, people in the opera houses in Italy are it's like going to a football game here in the States. I mean, it's revered. It's an institution. Most things haven't changed for a long time. So there's that hierarchy that's built in. And so you really learn, the soap opera of it, and then, working at the Met, it's such an institution, and you're really kind of like a worker bee in this gigantic hive of music and art. And, I was there for off and on for 4 or 5 years, and I would still get lost sometimes. I mean, it's just a cavernous thing, but those people are the greatest people that do what they do whether it's the costume department or wigs and makeup, or the music staff, the dancers, the supers, all of the team of assistant directors and assistant conductors. And so you really learn how to work in the most efficient way possible. You don't really want to cause waves there. You kind of just do what you're meant to do, and someone else's job is to do the other thing. So it's a very streamlined. And then, with Loft, God, we had a budget of literal cents that we were working with. And, how do we get the biggest impact, the highest quality without spending? And if we have $500 to spend, what's the best use of that? And, we would, how many times you and I would walk into one of those buildings and oh, okay, we have to perform here. How are we going to make this work? And how are we going to spend as little as possible, but give the audience, so you kind of learn how to MacGyver everything on that side. So I think all of those different things, if you remember how you solved all those problems, now in Omaha, it's not Loft. We have a budget, but it's not the Met that we are not, I'm not one of hundreds of people that work at the company. We're, in the 20s, so it's a small company. But I draw on all of those experiences, and, I have a great team that I work with. And we really sit down and we kind of just put our heads together and we're like, okay, if this doesn't work, how can we do this? And I think that's the biggest thing, is that if you can remember how you solved all those problems in those different situations, and you just kind of keep that bank of solutions.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart way to look at it. It makes a lot of sense. I feel like since you have had such a kind of, as you said, convoluted career, and roundabout, like people like you typically, I think, are a lot better at giving advice to younger musicians, because someone who won an audition at 22 and has stayed in that same job for 40 years, it's like, well, they didn't do it. But someone like you've kind of seen every aspect of the career and worked in every aspect. Say someone in undergrad or grad school was like, wanted to be a head of music or a career coach, pianist, like for what you do, or even a conductor, because I know you're also a great conductor. What sort of advice would you give a young musician in this world that is, contrary from what they would get in conservatory?
Sure. I honestly feel like the experiences that I have that make me a good coach that can help get somebody who's maybe not as into the character or having trouble communicating in the language or whatever. I think it's all of those crazy experiences that I had that weren't in the practice room and that weren't in a rehearsal, that like I have a lot to draw on. I never did a young artist program. I was never, I didn't waltz from school into the young artist program that then somebody heard me and hired me. I had to like reinvent myself a few times before I found my path. And I think all of that struggle and all of that like sidewinding and trying to figure out how to make it work and how to survive in the meantime gave me a lot of like my emotional bank is well padded.
Yeah.
And so then I have experiences to draw from when I'm working with young singers. And I think my advice would be, if somebody's interested in the coaching side of things, practice it, get your technique as solid as you can get it, as early as you can get it, because once you're in the thick of it, you don't always have time to, like, you don't have the luxury of a month to prepare an opera. A lot of my big breaks happened, from Italy into the United States, a lot of my big like opportunities happened because I was a last minute, somebody got sick or someone pulled out of the contract. And I remember being in Italy and I would get phone calls, on Saturday morning or Friday night. Hey, Maestro, do you know Turandot? Can you be in this city on Monday morning for rehearsal at 10 a.m.? Yeah, of course I know Turandot. Yeah, of course I'll get a train ticket. And I hang up and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know the whole opera. I know sections everyone else does. So then I would spend, the next day and a half cramming in the opera and studying on the train and whatever. Get your technique in line as much as you can. Learn how to learn, like in the most efficient way possible. Learn how to upload the music into your brain and into your hands. And like spend time with foreign language speaking people. I think, the fun thing for me, I enjoy the language side of things. The fun thing in opera is that, you're working in Italian 1700s one day and then like Puccini Italian the next day, or like Baroque, some early Baroque stuff, which is like more Latin than it is Italian. Surround yourself with people that you can like absorb the subtleties of all those languages if that's what you're interested in, because you're not going to learn it in a classroom.
Absolutely.
And yeah, you could go and do a summer language program, but then in between, how do you fill in those gaps? Find friends that speak Italian and French and German and Czech and Russian, and have vodka with the Russians and they'll help you with the Russian, and have Pinot Noir with the French ones and they'll help you with the French. yeah, and if you can find, if there's an aspect of opera that you are passionate about and you kind of want to focus on and specialize in, go for it.
Yep, absolutely. So speaking of that kind of aspect, like, where in the opera world do you see your passions lie the most? And also kind of following, as a follow-up to that, where do you see, pandemic aside, like, as of 2 months ago, where do you see the opera scene? Like, are there things that you really like happening? Are there things that you don't particularly love that's happening? All the things that you can comfortably say on the record. What is your assessment of the way opera is being made nowadays?
Sure. So I feel, and I have always been like this, even when I was, an undergraduate and I was hanging out with my voice major friends, I felt very passionate about like a certain bubble in the opera world. And I kind of took that idea and it's just always lived with me. And I feel now as an adult, especially at Opera Omaha, where like, the company is committed to new music and new commissions and stuff. I'm always the person who's saying, yes, let's do that amazing, cool new opera. But let's also put as much love and attention and attention to detail in that Donizetti opera that we're going to do right after that.
Absolutely.
And I love to be the like person who upholds the tradition of that, like Ottocento and all that. Like my favorite music ever is, Bel Canto, as you know, from all the work we did at Loft together. Rossini and Donizetti, if I did nothing but their operas, I would be a very happy man. I love Verdi. Early Verdi, I think, is brilliant and overlooked and underappreciated. But yeah, I feel like my position now is like the bastion of like, I'm gonna uphold the love and attention that tradition deserves. And I'm not going to poo-poo the new composer, and I'm not going to roll my eyes at, a new work or, a director that has an unusual take on things. But I'm going to make sure that everyone in the room gives Donizetti and Rossini the same respect that we're giving these new composers, and attention and everything. Yeah, and in terms of like trends that I'm noticing, there are a lot of people writing a lot of operas nowadays, and some things I don't necessarily consider opera just because there's singing involved. There are certain conventions I think that need to be, that I feel should be around or respected, and they're not always. That being said, every couple years somebody comes out with a brilliant new opera. Yeah, it's not the middle of the 1800s, so we don't have that many composers writing that many hits. But I think that there's a lot of really interesting and great stuff being written now.
Yeah, I would totally agree on all fronts. Great. I know I don't want to keep you here all day, but I do think it's worth talking a little bit about the current situation, and hopefully, I know we're all hoping that we can get back to normal as soon as possible. But we all have to be realists too. What sort of things, in light of the pandemic, have you either with Opera Omaha or just yourself? How have you seen some things that we as classical musicians who usually require a live audience and to be in the same room making music together? What are some ideas that you have and as to ways we can still continue to make music and still continue to reach people and spread our love of music while being confined to a virtual setting?
Sure. Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, I'm sure you have seen, because I see daily barrages of, virtual collaborations. Either the pianist is in one place and the singer's in a different place, or the singer is singing along with a track in their ear, or the Met just did that amazing virtual gala over the weekend, and Va Pensiero with all those people in the orchestra, and that's amazing. I don't think many companies have the resources to engineer something on that scale, because it's not as simple as like, okay, everybody plays along in a track. An engineer works on that afterwards and lines everything up. I mean, not being in the same room and trying to breathe and attack at the same time with one other person is tricky. To do it with like 80 instrumentalists and 100 chorus members is not, it doesn't just happen. As much as I love seeing these kind of living room things, it's a beautiful way to show the rest of the world that we are, our spirit is not broken, that we're still artists and we still have this desire to share what we have inside. I would, I think like a ticketed live stream performance, and maybe the company is on stage and maybe there's a smaller orchestra in the pit or something, but there isn't 1,000 people in the audience, but it's live streamed and you can purchase a ticket and watch it in your living room. Maybe an interesting thing. Opera's meant to be grand. Opera's meant to overwhelm the senses, and like there's a reason why when the Met lifts their curtain when they do Turandot, that everyone applauds. Like, it's overwhelming. It's supposed to be. A lot of opera is meant to be large. So that's tricky, and I don't have an answer to solutions for that. I'm curious to see what happens. There are a lot of people out there that are far more tech savvy than I ever will be. And so I always am like, tipping my hat to them who are able to create and engineer that kind of stuff. But I think the important thing is that no matter what the product is, that it's that creative spirit that we're not letting that flame die. We have to create because that's what we were put here to do, and we're going to do it no matter what. And yeah, if it means people in their living room doing a Schubert song, great. If it means the Met has that brilliant virtual gala, even better.
I think that's a great message, and I think one that we all need to remember and keep in mind, and a great place to leave it. Before we go, is there anything that you want to plug or promote that you have in the works?
We're kind of in the same holding pattern as almost every other opera company. We are, proceeding forward business as usual, but we're also preparing a lot of different contingencies so that we're not taken by surprise in July when we're told that we can't gather, or in, God forbid, November, we're told that we can't gather. We're coming up with plans. We keep having plans, well thought out and programmed, but we're hoping that it's all business as usual by the time we get to the fall.
Definitely. Well, Maestro, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out of your day. We really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for tuning in or watching later. We'll be back tomorrow with more Opera 101, and stop in and say hi. Thanks again, Sean.
Thank you.